Right, so we shall start. If everyone just keep themselves on mute for whilst we're going on, that'd be very helpful. So welcome everyone to part 4 on the ABC webinar series of Managing Change. Today's one is moving forward. So this is the final part of the series as we're taking you through, although I'll share some other bits to help you at the end on how you move your own business forward. Today, please feel free to use the chat. So I'm really interested for your own businesses around the challenges you face with moving forward. So what's kind of getting in the way for your businesses of doing that? So I'll bring the chat up on my screen as well, so that if you want to run things through, run questions, I'll try and deal with them as we go as well. So just to walk through, we started off obviously on mindset, and then we're going through our process of crisis management, stabilization, and move forward. So today is the final one of those on move forward. And just to reuse some of the diagrams, those who've been on the other sessions, you'll recognize this. But what we're doing here is obviously we're the hot air balloon. Crisis management was the mountain is looming. We got over the mountain with that. We were then still above the mountain range, and then stabilization is what we're probably in the process of right now. So I'm going to play forward, and let's imagine it's a couple of weeks' time. We're confident we've managed to stabilize our business, and we've got ourselves into a position where we know the money coming in, going out is working, and we can survive this period. We've started to rebuild our profile. We now want to very much, how do we move forward? What is the future of our business strategy-wise in this new world? Because as we talked about in the other sessions, the world will never be the same as it once was. We're starting to get more information now about what that future world might look like, certainly in the short term. So some things that may happen, may not. The immediate crisis again for the NHS, we appear to have reached and breached the peak, and it's been managed. And we're starting to look at when we might come out or have some of these social distancing things eased. But actually, it's very clear that it's not going to go back to full easing. There's a lot of things will still remain in place throughout this year and probably even into next year until we have a virus. And therefore, we need to think for our business around what does that mean I can do and can't do, but also what else can I do that I couldn't do before? What other opportunities are there? And that's what we're trying to do here. So as we've passed the mountain range, we're looking forward to the sun is shining again. How can we make hay whilst the sun shines? And that's what we're trying to get across with this image. So these were 2 slides from last time. We talked about our time windows, the immediate crisis management now, stabilization over the kind of next 4 weeks, and then moving forward is taking us beyond that. So it's at the end of that stage, next 2-3 months and beyond. And we said beyond kind of to the end of the year at the moment as the main piece, because things are moving so much. And then approach, we talked about understanding our purpose, the assets we have, i.e. what we're good at, and the problems that people are facing and how we might be able to help them with that. So the question here, and last time we talked about this, and I said what we'll do next session and today is talk about this in practice. So that's what we're going to try and do today. So if everyone could just go on to mute, that'd be helpful, please. So these are the 3 questions I put out last time. So what of our existing business model is still needed viable? What is not? What change are needed? So this is what of our previously what our business model was, what can we still do? And what can't we do? And understanding that for each of the 3 different time periods we've got as well. Next up is then what opportunities there are, so i.e. constraints that used to be in place, which are no longer there. And thirdly, what new problems are around that we might be able to resolve. So this is just to stimulate some thoughts, first of all, around each of these periods. So if we think about a few different sectors, so tradesmen, gardeners, roofers, these guys actually can still work now, as long as they maintain the social distancing, because they're solo jobs, they're outside. Internal tradespeople actually right now can't work, but actually very soon they are likely to be able to work again, albeit adhering to rules. So it might be a little bit restricted. If you used to be a 2-man band, maybe you have to work a little bit more solo and making sure you keep the distances from your customers as well. Retail, right now everything's shut. We just saw yesterday that B&Q are starting to reopen. So some of the physical premises are now opening, but they're managing the number of customers in store, the distance that people are from one another. And again, if we look at Italy and some of the countries who've gone first, Italy did this a couple of weeks ago. So they're creating opportunities with this. But what you can do in retail is go online, and that's what a lot of retailers have already done or tried to do. And even in the future world, on Scotland News last night, they were talking about a bookshop in Edinburgh, and they've got plans for when the restrictions are starting to release. They're going to open for the morning physically. They're going to have a session early morning, like the supermarkets now, which is just for more vulnerable people. So they get in first. They can make sure it's fully clean, no one else has been in, and protects them. Then it'll be open for restricted numbers for other people. And then in the afternoon, they're shutting the shop and they're just going online. So it's looking at different ways we can do these things to help fulfill our customers' needs, get ourselves back in business, but within the realms of what's available. We're moving down in complexity, if you like, for each of these. Hospitality, cafes, hotels, restaurants. Obviously, it's been very difficult for them throughout this period. They're shut. These guys are going to remain shut probably for a little bit longer. Are they going to open 2-3 months? We don't know. If they do, it might be open, but let's take a restaurant who we know to get as many covers in, the tables can sometimes be close to one another. Could well be you're allowed to open, but you have to have 2 meters between tables. So it might reduce someone down from a restaurant of 30 covers down to a restaurant of 8-10 covers. So that would be a very different market for them and for their own profitability and how that works. They might then need to look at longer hours, trying to get people see and say, well, actually, you need to have meals more quickly so we can at least get the table cleaned again and new people in. So it's thinking about how they can do these things. Obviously, again, a lot of restaurants have been trying to turn themselves into providing takeaway service or delivery service in this period. And again, that's a way they can do things. Conferences and events I've talked about before. We talked about the Excel Centre. Used to do hundreds of conferences a year with thousands of people. Right now it's a hospital. It will probably remain a hospital for this year. Even other conference centres that aren't being used, it is unlikely we're going to go back this year to allowing mass groups of people together into these sessions. So this for them is big crosses. What it has to look at beyond then is how will this be done differently? So if we think about conferences as an interesting example, we've got to think about what is the problems the customers have today. Why do people go to conferences? You have broadly 2 different types of people. So you have those who are presenting at the conference and trying to showcase their wares, their services, their products, what they do. And you have people who are attending the conference as potential buyers. So there's needs on both sides of the fence. So someone will start thinking about what's the needs that are being fulfilled by conferences, and actually how else can we do that in a remote world. And what you end up doing is some kind of virtual conference. Now, the interesting thing here is this opens up new possibilities. So one, it's going to start to be cheaper. So people don't have to travel, pay for hotels. It'll be cheaper potentially for the suppliers as well. They're not having to produce all their stores they used to set up. They can do it digitally. But this creates a new opportunity. We can now use AR, VR. You can have a virtual conference in virtual reality. We walk around and we can see things and we choose what to go into. If people are doing webinars, or seminars in the conference, they might record them in advance, which actually means I don't have to attend it live. I can choose the topics I most want to do. If I have that clash for my 2 favorite topics at the same time and I have to go to one, I can go to both. But also, I don't have to have dead time in between, so I can do it more effectively. And this might actually be the future of delivering a better, cheaper and more effective conference than we previously had. So if people will find new ways of delivering new services. And this is what I talked about previously, that crisis always creates opportunity and helps us move things forward. The high street, obviously, in UK has been dying slowly. This will accelerate some of the challenges the high street faces, but people will find new ways around. So that's kind of looking at some of these different sectors. Then in terms of opportunities, the main opportunity we got is actually people are now far more open to online activity. So there's 40 of us right now, all dialing in from across the world on a webinar. Now, this wouldn't have happened 2 months ago. So it's now something every day we're spending our life on Zoom and other products, and we're able to engage with people. We're far more open to the idea of doing online activity. We're having one-to-ones with our clients or potential clients online. We're doing sales and actually making new business. We're helping people out and doing service online. So we don't need to meet people and press the flesh as we used to. It's a new way of working. Everyone is open to this. Training courses are now, they've been online for a number of years, but people used to believe training was face-to-face. Well, now we're doing it online. And these things create efficiencies as well. So that's a whole new constraint which used to be there, that's just gone. We've learned we can do this. Remote working, reduced travel, increased efficiency helps us save money for our business, which we can redeploy in better ways to help our customers and our customer service. And geographically, as I said, we're delighted to welcome a group of people from India today. This was previously set up, it was kind of Forth Valley we were servicing, then maybe a bit of Edinburgh and Glasgow came in, then a few more people from Scotland, and now we've got people around the world joining us for a conference. Geographic constraints have gone, the world has got smaller. So these are all opportunities in business we now have that we didn't have 2 months ago. So how can we leverage these? And when we think about new problems, we talked about haircuts on one of the previous sessions. So home haircuts was in the news again this week, and for those of you who watched the BBC programme last night, the Comic Relief or Big Night In, they were riffing on that with a few celebrities having their haircuts by their family members and how badly that was going. But this is a real problem people have. That's a bit of a more a fun problem, if you like, but food deliveries, home activities, particularly for children. We've got 2 young children. My wife is gainfully trying to occupy them all the time, but people who can help solve some of these problems are really helping to move things forward. And then particularly mental health and isolation. So this will become a really prevalent problem for people getting restricted. How can we help people from a kind of wellness point of view? And I think there's been a mindset change in that for the last couple of years anyway, and that again has been accelerated by this. So it's thinking about the problems out there. What skills, expertise, the assets of our business do we have that can help with these problems or other problems that exist? And these are some of the things you need to think about as a business. What we then wanted to do was do an actual live example that we did with one of our clients, and they are actually on the phone today, and you get to hear from them a little bit later. So this is walking through it with you to show how you can go about doing this and using this yourself for your own business. So hopefully most of you are familiar with SWOT analysis. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So my first stage, and what we did with Dico IT, who we get to speak a little bit later, is I challenged them to say, okay, so tell me, what are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? And the strengths and weaknesses is more, that's not affected by coronavirus. That is what you are good at anyway, or maybe what your weaknesses were. So what we got here, their strengths were very much about their customer service was second to none. What they do for their customers, they care more, they deliver better service, they spend more time, they fix the problem, they're not just putting patches. It was all around that piece. The opportunities and threats is actually more, you'll see the coronavirus things coming in. So there's more opportunities given by coronavirus. I talked about some of that on the previous slide. And again, some of the threats, some were previously existing, some are coronavirus ones. But this is kind of helping shape the mind first of all. And then what we did is we went into the same table we've just seen. So looking at this, first of all, what the existing business model is still viable by each of the time periods. So actually, when we looked at this from an IT services point of view, actually most of the model is still viable. So if you're trying to put infrastructure in, hardware, software, hardware kit, okay, we can't right now. We probably will be able to actually, once these immediate restrictions are done, but most of the servicing and support that's done is done remotely anyway. So that doesn't change. Now, there is a restriction around some of the customers might be anxious about their own cash flow and want to back down, but their ability to deliver their service actually is still there. So the first thing here is there's a lot of ticks. So actually most of their business is still entirely viable, even in a remote world. Other businesses would obviously be different at this point, but this is the example we've got. So then we look at new opportunities. So we talked about these, the same kind of ones we talked about. Geographic constraints was obviously an immediate one we think about from this. IT literate businesses trying to get online. So we know a lot of people are trying to spin up remote working and maybe are not sure how, they've not done it before and have difficulties there, and upgrading infrastructure. So how we might do this. And by each time period, again, the geographic constraints is purely because other businesses in the short term are almost, they've got other problems. They're not necessarily thinking about taking on new suppliers. But actually in the very near future, and people are realizing this is now the new way forward, it creates an opportunity here where actually the Dico are based out of Glasgow, primarily serving people across the Central Belt and a few other Scottish companies. Actually, they don't have to. They can help people anywhere. So why be constrained by that? And let's look at the market. We've got an interesting piece on the upgrading infrastructure. So this is helping people get ready now. There's a realistic chance that we'll come out of lockdown for a little bit, and then if it flares up again, we might go back into lockdown again in November time is some of the thinking. So there's a window here where actually people who maybe haven't been able to fulfill their staff working effectively remotely now, we can get some infrastructure upgraded, which needs to be there in person. And we've got that short time to do it before a future lockdown would come. So some things can be quite focused around what we might do. And if you think then about new problems that we can help resolve, so these are problems now which people have more than they had before. So remote working, backups and disaster recovery, bandwidth issues. So we're trying to work at home along with our partners, our children. They're on Netflix, we're on this, and we're finding our Zoom calls flaking out. Well, that's creating bandwidth. How can we help with that? Virus, malware, spyware. So one of the things we've seen is fraud has been spiking because fraudsters always take advantage of crises as well. So they're looking and they know everyone's now doing things in a different way they didn't used to do. That creates opportunity for them. So we need to try and protect ourselves against these things. And then from an IT point of view, if people are now working remotely, they're no longer necessarily behind our immediate firewall of our servers in our system. They might be logging in from their own computer, and we've got to set it up slightly differently. So it's getting controls in place and maybe new processes in place for things like data protection and so on as well. So these are some of the problems. And again, actually, they can help with all of these across all timeframes. So this creates a whole new set of activities which customers will face that they actually have the skills to help with. So if you then think about this immediately, so for Dico IT, what does it mean? It means their business actually, that they can still serve right now a lot of what they're doing, provided the customers can buy in. So it's the business is still entirely viable. The main opportunity right now, we sat down and talked about, and we thought this geographic piece was the real opportunity, that actually their offering, if you like, or their USP in Scotland we actually give you better service than anyone else. Now their price in Scotland is higher middle because that's the service they're giving. But actually, if they compared their prices to, say, a London market or South England market, they can give the better service they give anyway, but actually with a Scottish cost base, their prices are also very competitive and at the bottom end. So it gives a double win here. So this is a huge opportunity that we identified for Dico. So I shall pause at that point and let Armin, who's one of the directors from Dico, I wanted to kind of get your perspective, having been through the process. If you'd like to maybe just introduce yourself to everyone first, and then give a few minutes on how you felt it was going through this process and how effective that worked for you.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see everybody here. So just talking about the session that Neil and I had last week. So I didn't really know what to expect. So we have been going through our challenges like every other business out there. So when we sat down, Neil had everything prepared for us to go through. We knew what our strengths were, not so much our weaknesses as such, but basically Neil asked all the right questions. Between us, we managed to get all our strengths and weaknesses out there to see where we can try and adapt our business to basically thrive once all this, or even during this lockdown. So, and as Neil said, one of the things that we identified was our level of customer service. That's what we thrive on. That's where we feel we're different from any other IT out there, is the level of service that we give. Doesn't matter the size of business it is, we give them the same care. So with Neil's help now, we've identified that we don't need to just be working in Scotland. We can work, across the border and even beyond. And as Neil said, we've identified that we can provide the same level of service that we give here to companies down south and save them money. So as Neil says, the world it's become smaller. So it's basically the right questions being asked, identified that we do have strengths that we could possibly, hopefully, thrive out of this in the end. Would you agree, Neil? That was one of the things I think the biggest outcome was being able to use the skills that we've got just now and adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all about adaptability and finding your place. Now, as we saw if we go back to the previous slide, for Dico, let me go back to the previous slide. For Dico, they've not got a major problem where they need to rip up and start again or do a major pivot, as we talked about, from their business model, because their business model still works. So that was the first tick, and that's why it's important, that first section, to do that. For some people, you might have a lot of crosses in that top section, and actually you need to do something very different. So that's the first question, is understanding what we can do of our previous model and what we can't do. And if there's a lot you can't do, then your pivot needs to be more extreme. Given that we found we can do a lot, then the question is, so it's then about the opportunities, and we know opportunities will come out of this. So it's how can we leverage those to get more of ourselves? And then what it actually turned into, having had the strengths and weaknesses, we were then looking at, so how do we then position, if the opportunity is geographic growth, what's the proposition we need to put forward? How do we position this? How do we market this? And that's kind of going back to some standard basics you would do at any time to position your business most effectively. So we're looking at how we can do that for Dyco and help them with that, so that when they go to the London market, actually they can stand out and people can readily see what makes them different, and that will help them attract new customers in the right way.
The geographic part of it, it was something we'd always thought about, but we didn't know what to do and what our weaknesses were. So Neil's managed to identify those, everything from simply changing our website to implementing different processes within the business in order to be prepared to be able to offer that support to companies down south. So basically, I think the session was supposed to last about 2 hours, but we ended up about 3 hours because there was so much to discuss. So yeah, I found it really, really beneficial, and from then we've already started to make changes ourselves.
And what I wanted to then touch on, so it's difficult, and we've talked about this before, that there's too much, when there's so many unknowns. How do we know which way to turn? And in business, that creates us a number of problems. So we're really anxious in business about making the wrong decision. So if we're not sure, if we don't have the right information, if we're not sure what may happen, we're scared about making that wrong decision, then what that creates is inertia. So it just forces us to be too uncertain and go, I'm just not sure, I'll wait for more information, I'll wait for something else, and therefore we end up doing nothing. Now, we've talked on previous sessions, the most dangerous thing is actually doing nothing. They're the ones who are most at risk of going out. So what we need to do is find a way to do something. So that what I've taken you through before on those couple of slides, and what Armin's talked about, is trying to help you find ways to address that. But there's other ways we can do that as well. So if we think about, we're standing here now and there's all these different paths in front of us, and how do I know the right ones to take? Well, what we do is scenario planning. So scenario planning is thinking about the what ifs. So think about all the different things that could happen, might happen. And we know some of them because the politicians are talking about them, the papers are talking about them. Think about other things as well. Go back, take yourself to a whiteboard session with your other leadership team, even broader team. Just ask them, what do we think might be the future landscape, the future problems? And then for each of these, what you think about, so if that happened, what would we do as a business? And create a high level view. So if that happened, we'll do this. If this happened, we'll do that. And you have a little plan for each. And then some bits will know the information. And previously, if we talk about marketing things or doing things, or new bases or reduced bases, we can create scenarios in a high level business plan, which allow us to say that might give 10% of this or this number and run it. The rest of it we don't know. We'll just make some sensible assumptions. And that allows us to run these high level financial scenarios. And then what we have is a set of, if this happened, we think we might do that. And we can look at the financial outcome of each of these would be X, Y, or Z. And that will help us then understand the better paths forward. We can then think about, so of those what ifs, what is more likely to happen? And then say, so if we think this is probably what's going to happen, we can look at our scenarios in each of those and go, in that world where these things most likely happen, the best approach for us to do would be this, this, this. So that gives us a way forward. Now, is it going to be perfect? No, right? Because we don't know everything that's going to happen, but it gives us an approach where we can actually start doing things. So don't try to be perfect. It's not about that. It's about doing something. What you will be is you'll be directionally correct. And what I mean by that is we'll go forward in the right way, but it won't necessarily be right down the middle of the arrow. But then later on, as more information comes to light, what we do is we tack. So tack's a bit like a mini pivot, but we already know what the right tacks are because this will be the other scenarios we've done on the what ifs. So new information comes out. We thought we were going to come out of lockdown in 3 weeks' time, but actually it's in 7 weeks' time. So that's a different play. Or we thought when we came out of lockdown, we wouldn't be able to have any meeting, meet with more than 2 people, but actually they're allowing groups of 5 people, so we can do things slightly different. But we'll have thought about these different scenarios and created paths. So what it does is it allows us to go through in different ways, but it means we're doing something now, we're starting to move forward, and ultimately we're starting to get back in business. As we've all talked about before, that is the most important thing for the economy now as well, is businesses need to be in business. We know this is the long haul, so we need to get back out there. We need to be engaging with our customers. We need to be buying from other businesses. We need to be selling to customers and actually getting that market back live. So Q&A time. Questions either for myself or for Armin as well. Who's got any questions, or what questions do you have? And I guess my question to you all is, at this point at the moment, what's holding you back? I shared some of the models we used with Dyco. Would you be able to do that for your own business? If not, what would get in the way? Stunned silence. Let me unmute people.
Neil, can you go back a slide? Would you mind?
No problem. Do you have a question, Sarah?
Well, it's not so much a question, because I think everything that you're talking about is brilliant, and it's very much what needs to happen. I think what I'm certainly experiencing from my clients at the moment is this feeling of paralysis when they've got everybody on furlough, which I know is not a useful thing to say, but it's about how do you start to do this stuff when you don't have anybody that can, if financially you can't afford to bring anybody back in. It's not useful because it's not addressing what you're talking about, but it's a very real consideration for people.
It is useful because it is a real problem. So, and this is, in the ideal world, everyone kind of would switch back on at the same time, but who steps first? And that's the problem we've got right now, because I can't bring people back from furlough because that puts my cash flow at risk, and that means I then don't have the need for other people, so it becomes this swings and roundabouts. I would love, I have shared this through some of my IID links to the government. I'd love the government to create some kind of business support fund where they gave grants to businesses, but they had to be spent with other businesses. So it's not just cash in the bank, it's cash to spend on other businesses, and that creates this environment. And I'd love things like that to happen to help stimulate the economy, because I think it's getting over that initial piece. The other way it can happen is some of the bigger companies who have bigger cash flows could start to stimulate this. I'm sure we'll see the government will find ways of putting money into the economy in a business manner where they're giving it out to some people to buy other things. So I think we'll find some of these things happen. The furlough thing, everyone at the moment, they took the furlough and they did it. Everyone's coming to the point of review. So most of the clients I've spoken to, they're about to review their furlough. They're starting to bring some back, is what most people are doing. So they're not going to bring the whole workforce back, but they'll start bringing them back in stages. So it might be 20% come back first and then 40% a few weeks later. So we'll start to see things will come a little bit more slowly. But it is a real problem we have. But we just need to engage with our clients in whatever our role is at the moment and see where their head's at and how we might help them. And as I talked previously, my view on this is it's an honest conversation with people at the moment to say, where are you at? What could you afford? And some people are still in the mindset of, I can't afford anything. Other people might say, I like your help, but I can only afford a bit right now. It's just like, that's okay. I think it will start more slowly, and then it'll build and snowball from there. Aileen, you've put a question out to Armin. Do you want to ask a question, Aileen?
Oh, yes. Hi, Armin. I'm Aileen. I work alongside Neil. I was just wondering, what was the single thing that allowed you to make that sort of mindset shift to looking forward? We've been talking about that quite a lot today, but I wondered if there was a single thing or was it a series of things?
Survival. I would say survival, because if we had to fail, then the number of clients that we look after, we would be failing them as well, because we'd leave them in an exposed position. So we had to look forward. And as Neil said, I feel, I agree that what's now happened, things are going to change forever. So I don't think we'll ever go back to the world we knew. So people, businesses will adapt. They will work differently. So we've got to move with times. If we stay static, then we won't move forward with what the requirements are for our clients. Yep. So we've got to be one step ahead of them and adapt our business first in order to be able to help them.
Great, good answer.
So I'm conscious we're kind of at time, so I hope that's been really helpful for you guys. And thank you again for joining in. Now, this is the last of the kind of 4 series, but what I wanted to do is, it's kind of been a lot of theory, and I know a lot of people need some help on the practice side. So what I was going to propose is, for those who are interested, and if you are interested, then we'll send you the details afterwards, but you can drop an email to help@abc.business and let us know, and we'll carry on these sessions for another 2 or 3 weeks, where they'll become entirely practical. So what they'll do is we'll break you into smaller teams or groups yourselves to work through some of the examples we've got for your own businesses on there and actually get to do it in practice. And then at the end of each session, come back to the main group and talk about how you got on, the challenge you face, and we'll help you with that. Because this is actually about trying to help you be able to use these tools for your own business and take your own business forward, and have the ability to work with your peer group on the challenges you face and help each other overcome. So we found that's a really effective way for helping businesses move forward. So I hope that will be of interest to a lot of you. As I say, we'll drop an email out this afternoon, and if you just want to drop a note back to help@abc, then we'd love to have you join us for that, and we'll create some little practical sessions for you to engage with one another and help each other through. But on that point, I'd like to say thank you very much. Have a lovely weekend, everyone. Hope the weather stays good. Stay safe, be kind, and look forward to seeing you all next week.
Thanks, Neil.
Great.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks all.
Thanks, Neil.